Hello all and welcome to the Frozen Fury tutorial. My name's CC123 and I'm just going to very quickly go over the build, specifics including gear, skills, paragons, and then I'll do a Grift 65 just to show you a bit of its gameplay. So firstly I'll just talk a little bit about the background for the build. So for those that have been playing the game for a number of patches now, or back since D3 Vanilla, might remember that this build was actually quite popular in 2.1. It's called Frozen Fury, and a lot of us who were playing it at the time thoroughly enjoyed it, particularly those of us who were fans of, or weren't fans I should say, of some of the other sets going around. This provided a good fun alternative that did more than most typical Might of the Earth sets, which was no spenders, jog on the spot, and so on. This particular build allowed you to do two things. One, provide a lot of crowd control via cold earthquakes, and secondly, a bit of long distance spam action in between waiting for your cooldowns. So the principle was pretty basic, but what we ended up with was an incredibly fun set, and for me the most fun build I've ever had in the Diablo franchise, both 1, 2 and 3, and in particular Diablo 3. So moving on, in 2.4, anyone who plays the PTR and frequents the PDR forums will be familiar with my note. What I like to do is champion those things that the class needs the most, put them across in informed posts, and what we've noticed has been happening quite well the past 3 PTRs is we've been getting a lot of traction on things that we want. So the 2.4 PTR was no exception. What we achieved to get Frozen Fury back in action was the 6 set bonus. We had the addition of Seismic Slam added into that. The devs replied to our post requesting that that be added in there. They kindly acknowledged that post. John Yang, I think, replied and added it in there for us to test. The second thing that we also asked for was a number of buffs to both the Fury of the Vanished Peak and the Gavel of Judgment. So the Fury of the Vanished Peak got 2 buffs actually. The first was to add in Life per Fury Spent as an extra affix, so that's now an additional affix in addition to all its core roles. The second thing was, you'll note that the Seismic Slam damage bonus has been increased. I think it was about 30 to 40%. It's now 100 to, just holding on control, 100 to 125%, which is terrific. So that's really good, and that's basically brought this build back to life. So that was pretty good. What we had to do obviously was farm a couple of the extra bits to get the set going. So about a week into the patch now, myself, Sil, and 1 or 2 others that were eagerly awaiting to try the build have done so, and we're pleased to say it actually exceeds our expectations. We've refined it quite a bit, and I think I've got basically the bulk of the bugs worked out of the build, so we'll just go through it. Starting with the skills, it's the usual Seismic Slam Permafrost. Now the main thing that you want to, if you want to start this build, that you want to lock into your brain, this is not an earthquake centric build. So any time you think, I need to adjust or change or re-roll something to increase earthquake, that means you're doing it wrong. The whole purpose of this build is Seismic Slam. So all damage is designed to buff Seismic Slam. What cold does in cold earthquakes, and you'll see this during the gameplay, is to freeze the map and provide a bit of lockdown. Now a simple way of explaining that, as I do to a couple of mates, is think of a schoolyard bully that holds someone's head with his left hand, that's earthquake, while he slaps him with his right hand. That's pretty much the gameplay. Leap Death from Above, that's a no-brainer. So anyone that plays the set will know you go Death from Above because once your crowd control runs out or expires, which has been particularly a big thing since 2.3, Death from Above will still stun everything when you leap in there. Now, what was interesting that we found out by mistake was that Battle Rage Bloodshed is by far the best thing to run. The reason why I say by mistake, and a lot of barbs will go, well, what do you mean? Bloodshed is fantastic, you should be using that anyway, is, well, with Seismic Slam there was 2 other runes you used to go for. One was to gain critical hit chance because it's cold and it's not HOTA, so you can't go up to 100%. That's impossible. You can't stack that much stuff on your gear. So what you wanted to do was try and increase your crit chance every way you could. So Into the Fray was quite popular. And the other one was for this build back in 2.1 was just to increase your overall seismic slam damage by 15%. So, and I'll show you why Bloodshed's so amazing a little bit later. Once I just work out where I was. Now, Warcry does two things. Warcry obviously provides you a little bit more immunity if you need it. In the case of my build, I've got some very bad non-ancient drops, which I've yet to replace. So I'm desperately lacking extra resist all at the moment. But what I actually prefer once the build matures and I get the resistances up to where I want is charge. And the reason why I'll explain that later, but you do run out of fury on this build, and you use charge as a magazine clip reload amidst a fray of seismic slams before your next rotation comes up. So that's what I recommend there. Sprint. Now this build is designed to be fast and a alternative to Whirlwind. It's not as fast, obviously, because Whirlwind's a freak, but I love Sprint on there. It helps you get between mobs, and it's actually a synergistic tool that's designed to enable you to keep up your rampage, and you'll see why during the gameplay. The only setback, and I suppose it's a quality of life improvement that I'll request in 2.5, is that I love to farm with Chilanix Chain, hence why I love Warcry and Sprint on the build. However, that's the only skill on this entire build that isn't affected by the 2-set cooldown bonus, so we'll request to try and get that in there, which would be as I said, it's probably more of a quality of life buff to the set. So going back to the skills, the last one is Earthquake Chilling Earth, so no real surprise there. Now the four key passives that I recommend are Rampage, for obvious reasons, and that synergizes with the armor damage mitigation bonus of the set. Synergizes very well with it. No Escape, so this is a ranged type build. Anyone that plays Demon Hunter will, I think, naturally gravitate towards this kind of build. It's a very similar style of play, with the exception that you can actually provide a lot of crowd control and then do range damage, and Earth and Might for obvious reasons. Without that and leaping on top of people's heads, you're going to run out of fury. The other fourth passive I recommend, and I've got this on my Hellfire Army, is obviously Ruthless. Now, Hellfire Army, in my opinion, with focus and restraint, are the triumvirate that you want, but I'll talk more about that in a sec. Which enables you to stick on a fifth. Now I stick on Superstition because it just takes the edge off a little bit when you get those nasty affixes and you're doing speed 65s through to 70s. And then if you decide to push a little, you've got the fifth slot to change that out for Boonabu Cathals. And obviously you don't need Sprint then because you're spamming and leaping more than anything, and that's where you whack in Wrath of the Berserker. So that's that. We'll go through the gear now. The best Fury of the Vanished Peak, in my opinion, is similar to the 2.3 best Gabble, is what we call a 10-7. So you want 10% damage and 7% attack speed. And this build, and this is the second sort of principle you want to lock into your head, it's all about attack speed. And attack speed in this build is your cooldown. So the more attack speed, the quicker you will cool down. And this is my non-season account, by the way, so I've nearly maxed the cooldown. Or max the attack speed, and then in turn the cooldown potential for this build, and I'll show you that when we do some gameplay. Now, if you don't have one of these, don't worry. You get them very quickly in this game. The loot pools for mighty weapons and mighty belts are incredibly small, so the quickest and best way, and I've done this with mates that want to quickly gear up with this build, is to use Kanaya's Cube. Chuck in a rare two-handed mighty weapon, or chuck in a rare mighty belt, and you will get these things very quickly. Now, I just want to note one thing with the Fury of the Vanished Peak, and we had to figure this out to work out what was going on. That extra Life per Fury spent affix, as you can see there, it's rolled from 2500 to 3000. You'll see people that have overall one less affix, however their Life per Fury spent's much higher, so it's I think between 4 and 5000. Now what's happened there is the game has actually rolled a second Life per Fury spent, probably where you'd see my damage or my attack speed, and instead of having two lines of Life per Fury spent, it's added them together. Now you can roll one out, or if that's not feasible and you're better off leaving it in there, because let's say you've got attack speed on another separate roll, so that's what you want, what you can do is, rather than going for the belt that I'm going to recommend here, is you can go a slightly different way, because obviously you don't need more life per fury spent on your build, just use a witching hour. But I'll talk more about that when I get to the belts. Now I'll just skip the rings and go straight to the set items. So it's all about attack speed. As you can see there, I do have 2 pieces of augmented gear, but they were 2 50 max spare legendary gems I had, so I've just thrown them on. So all I'm getting here is an extra 500 strength in total from augmentation, so don't worry about that too much. Now we've got attack speed on there, which does raise the question of what about Vit, but I'll talk about vitality at the end. So you want attack speed, crit chance, crit damage. Very hard set of gloves to get, so definitely if you want to get this build, that's a long-term thing. Now in the short term, if you don't have that, that's fine. Whack on the extra vitality and do the best you can with what you've got. Yeah, this is interesting. So as you can see there, I've got the old strength, fit, resist, life percentage. You're probably asking why not cooldown. Well, I've maxed my attack speed just about on this, and I found I simply don't need it. So if you are unable to get full attack speed on this build in the areas that I identify, definitely add cooldown here. That will help take the edge off. Now you can see over here, it's the usual strength, fit, crit chance. That's that second bit of augmentation I mentioned earlier. However, I do have life percentage, so again, no cooldown. Now that's because, as I said earlier, I've maxed the attack speed just about, so found I just simply didn't need it. That's my health, by the way, so 728k. And if I go to the life percentage, it's incredibly high, and I still have room to, where is it? 76%. I'll still have room to increase that further when I get some more ancient stuff on my gear. So as you can see there, I've got a rubbish bit of chest. It's not ancient. So with that high life percentage that's on the build, when I do get that to 650, that will go quite a long ways, rather than just a seemingly 150 or potentially 150 more bit. It will increase by another 79% on top of that. And then we get to the belt. So what's quite funny is a lot of people that see this belt go, wow, what is that? And I'm like, well, you probably salvaged the crap out of it and can barely remember it. Your brain's just literally blocking it out now as a rubbish belt. But there's actually 3 belts you can run in this build depending on what you're doing. As I mentioned earlier, Chilanx Chain is a great one to use, and it's my preferred belt for farming, speed farming. However, it's a little bit of a... I'm not really using it at the moment just because it's a little bit painful with that war cry, and I don't want to stack cooldown on a build just to satisfy one, or I should say, I don't want to stack cooldown on the build just to make sprint that little bit quicker. So I'm sort of foregoing Chilanx Chain at the moment in favour of this belt or a Witching Hour. So obviously Witching Hour adds more crit hit damage, but the drawback with that is it's not a mighty belt, so you can't roll on life per fury spent, and this relates back to my point earlier where if you've got a 10-7 Fury of the Vanished Peak, you've got that chunk of life per fury spent, and I actually find you need a little bit more, so that's where it on the belt with attack speed is terrific, and I much prefer that, as does Sil, who's running this build at the moment, than the very slight amount of damage Witching Hour provides. However, as I said though, if you end up with one of these and you get that big double roll of life per fury spent, by all means you don't need the life per fury spent on this, so why not get a bit of compensation back with some crit hit damage and put on a Witching Hour. So that's that. Now, the second thing that I will be requesting in 2.5 is that this belt be buffed. I don't think it should be buffed for anything that can be used in the Immortal King set because there's no room. You're going to be using that belt. Now, you'll see in the gameplay here that the drawback or the con with this particular build is you are subject to Vortex, and you do get smashed around a bit, and freeze is a bit of a problem when you're freezing yourself and you can't see the ice explosions. You're like, okay. So I'd love for this belt to be a good utility belt and to provide some immobilise effect immunity or even some further damage reduction, because this build does suffer from being a little bit too glassy as early as 72 when you're having a crack at that. But anyhow, more on that to come. Pants are pretty self-explanatory, there's no real surprise there. And as you can tell, I've got a pretty crappy set of boots that I'm running around with at the moment, but they will be the usual strength, fit, resist all, and a little bit of seismic slam bonus there. I'm not convinced you actually need the 15% here, not with that massive 100 to 125 on there. However, when you look at the alternatives, there's not really much to that 15%. Anyhow, So as I said earlier, definitely Hellfire I think is the best, and you definitely don't want to be keeping one with Strength. For those that aren't aware, as you increase with your Paragons, Strength becomes redundant, as it's a, I suppose you can say it's an additive bonus, whereas Cold Percentage, even though it doesn't show up on your damage here, which frankly you shouldn't be using that, that's a very out of date thing that needs to be addressed. You want Cold Percentage there and Cold Percentage there. Diablo, I think it's Diablo Progress. I actually think it's a great website where you can load this on, and it will properly add on your elemental affixes. Yeah, so that's why you want the... and as I said earlier, if you're going to do a little bit of pushing, you get that extra passive, which really opens up the build to putting on Wrath of the Berserker as well. No surprise there with the Braces of Destruction. Yeah, just the usual sort of rolls there. And I'll go back to the legendary gems in a sec. Now the two rings, you want Focus and Restraint, and you want Attack Speed, Crit Chance, Crit Damage. So yeah, very hard rings to get. Very hard. They're going to be the hardest things in the game for you to get. I've kept every Focus and Restraint that's ever dropped ever since they became a much improved and more versatile ring set. So for those that don't know, we couldn't even use these for the Leap Quake set, I think, up until, I can't remember, it was either 2.2 or 2.3, because the build didn't even generate one of the two, or didn't even activate one of the two bonuses. And of course, as you increase with your Paragon, Strength on Rings is one of the first things you want to start to roll off. Now it is a ranged damage dealer, hence why I'm using Z's, using Stricken and using Bane of the Trapped. Now if you're a lower Paragon, which is the case with my Seasons Barb running the same build, I'm using Ice Blink at the moment, which is great, provides that extra 10% crit chance. But if you get to the stage where I am on my 9 seasons and you're very readily speed farming 65s, you much prefer Bane of the Stricken. Quite simply, I just compared the two, took Stricken out, put Ice Blink in, recorded some times, and was getting much better ones on average, obviously with Stricken. For anyone that's used this build in the past in 2.1, you'll note that I wasn't a fan of Z's. I thought Z's was a rubbish stone, so you'll probably be surprised to see me using it. What's happened, in my opinion, is the game, due to power creep and us being able to level up the gems a lot higher than we could when they very first came out, has meant that I guess you could say the crossed multiplicative ability that we have with the set bonuses and other gems in socket, including Bane of the Trapped and Stricken and so on, has meant that these things are now maturing, I guess, in builds. And I noticed that, so I actually ended up at this combination with swapping out various different legendary gems. Bane of the Trapped definitely cross-pollinates with this exceedingly well. The only thing that I think is a little bit weak is the No Escape passive. I've got to do some more tests on that, but like, it helps, but I've ended up simply arriving at the conclusion that it's worth using, because Brawler from a range distance does stuff all. You're only dropping 2 Quakes, then jumping out. So Brawler very quickly becomes redundant. And obviously this is a spender, so Berserker Rage is of no use at all. So that's that with the gems. Did I miss anything? No, I'll just go through the core stats on the sheet. So for those who aren't aware, obviously we have in the set bonus the 4 set bonus of Leap Games the effect of the Iron Impact rune. And the rune's effect and duration are increased by 150%. Now, I can see what the developers have done there after having a good look at the build. Band of Might is obviously the ring that we cube along with Lutsocks, and we use Furnace, because, again, remember, it's a Seismic Slam build, really, that uses Earthquake. Now, with that 150% time-wise, what they've done is ensure that the armor rune lasts at least the 8 seconds for Band of Might. So the reason why I point that out is if you look at the armor rune itself on the build, how it reads, it's 4 seconds, it's not 8, so you don't have to worry about that. So if you look at my toughness, I'll put on Warcry, and you can see armor's 85%. I'll leap 3 times. 3, 95%, 243. Now when it drops off, you'll notice it drops off twice. One will be the armor and the other one will be Band of Might. There's 1, and there's 2. Okay, so it's very important with this build, even though it's got sprint on it. And that's because sometimes you can just get distracted in the fun action that it is of doing 2 things, not just one attack. And a little archer with an arrow will take you out in 1 hit. And you're like, that's right, I've got my 8-second armor bonus and bandamite bonus. So, okay, that's enough of the chitter chatter. I'm going to go and do a 65 now. We were actually bumping it up to 68. So, sorry, I forgot Paragons. I'll just go through Paragons quickly. So Paragons, believe it or not, it's a little bit different than what you're probably expecting. What I recommend if you're between Paragon 0 and 800 is to first level up Vitality. The reason being, as I've said, is that you, in 2 cases, are not using 2 very large Vitality rolls on gear. So the first one is obviously the weapon. You're not rolling the massive potential Vitality roll on that you can. And the second one that a lot of people usually have on gear is the Vitality there. Now, I've got no doubt there'll be a lot of armchair generals and Barb saying you should have Vitality in there while you're rolling it off gloves. You don't need that extra attack speed. Well, you don't miss it. You don't miss it if you do it this way. The build is that strong. I'm more than comfortable to say that that's the right way of doing it. So while you're leveling up, get that up to 500 I find is enough to take the edge off, and then switch back to strength. So you get your first 400 on your way to Paragon 800, and then from 8 to 900 you can quite easily get that to 5. Offense, it's all just the usual. The only difference being here is I recommend you go cooldown first. You just, that extra 10%, as I said, will just take the edge off, and obviously you probably won't have the attack speed on the rings. The second one is your attack speed. So remember, lock this into your head. Attack speed is cooldown. So you're going cooldown and cooldown. Then crit chance, because this is a slam build. So we don't get all the crit chance bonus for more fury, like hammering the ancients, so you want that. And then you want crit hit damage. Regardless of where you've got crit hit damage, you know, a lot of people are saying, oh, it's too low. It doesn't matter. You need as much crit chance as you can. After that here, I recommend obviously the usual resist all. Now you get life per fury spent on your Fury of the Vanished Peak, so that'll be the last one you do, life regen. You don't need it. Then I recommend you go life percentage, because you're going to need as much life as you can, as quickly as you can. Then armor, then life regen last. This one here, now I've actually got a mistake here. I've got resource cost reduction in it, which I shouldn't have. You want life on hit first, and then you want area damage. Why not a bit of gold fine as well. Now the reason why you take resource cost reduction off is you're already getting quite a nice discount on your resources anyhow from the affix in Fury of the Vanished Peak. And I found here through testing, just by taking that off, it did help with cooldown that little bit more. So that's why I recommend you don't bother having it on there. If you end up with, particularly if you end up with, and I've had this problem with other ancient ones on my Seasons account, where you roll a second lot of resource cost reduction and that you can't roll off, you've had to roll something else like the DPS up or something. So that will certainly help with that. So okay, we'll get in and do a 65 now, and I'll just talk while I'm playing. I'll just simply talk about what I'm doing. So Warcry, fueling sprint. I'll drop 3 quakes that'll hold everything while I kill it. 1, 2 on the target, 1 away. Want to maximise that distance. Yep, there's some other crap in the way, but it's fine, I'll destroy it. 2 over here, sprint out a little. He's running after me, so I'll just start doing a typical sort of kite. If I can not stuff up my jumps, which I just did. So popping Warcry. And he's gone. Okay, so that's pretty good. That's about maximum distance that I like to be away. Now the trick you got to remember with Seismic Slam braces is that the bonus on that applies to only the first 5 targets. So what that means when you're leaping around like a madman and you're kiting, it's great to have a bit of fun. I mean, the object is to use it as a bit of a broom and try and hit everything. But you want to try and prioritise those targets that pop out the health wave, so your elites, with that first 5 where you can. So you've got to remember with your positioning of the earthquake that your last one should put you in a position where you're maximising the distance between you and that elite, but also trying to, as best as possible, put the elite, or you position the elite so it's one of those first 5 targets. So as you can see here, just towards the end there, I've got them as being one of the first 5. Should be able to miss that fatty and finish them off. Unfortunately, one's run up. And over here to the right, and that last guy's definitely one of the first 5. And that's them taken care of. Now you drop a quake and you run off, and that quake will slowly tick down. And notice rampage. When I do that and I run away, you notice rampage is maintaining that because the ticks are slowly ticking down. As long as you ensure you drop a quake before you run off on a semi-damaged target, think of that as a timer that will go off and keep your rampage up as it kills it 2 to 3 to 4 seconds while you're running away. So as you can see there, I maintain my rampage between the last pack and this one. Okay, crowd control is going to start wearing off these guys shortly, so I need to kill them. Notice I positioned well enough that they were the first 5 targets through that whole barrage of slams. Now onto cooldown, you notice I've had no problems. Apart from fueling sprint, that's fine. I'd rather the Fury went out on a few more slams than sprint. First world problems, as they say. 1, 2, 3, I'm out. Making sure that yellow is one of the first 5 when I can. You can see he's going right down very quickly. Now Z's does provide a little bit of stun, so if you're doing higher ones than this, you'll notice that you are getting a little bit of a stun effect, particularly if you're running 2 Barbs. 2 Barbs with this build is just absolutely amazing again. Particularly if you've got a mate that likes to run boulder tossed. Throw him in the mix and he will rob you for life. So as you can see there, I'm not needing any cooldown in this build. And that is our new favourite pylon in the game, speed. Not just because it has a sprint on it, but look at those slams. 2, 3. So think of speed as not just increasing a slams a shitload, but it's increasing your cooldown. So more leaps as well. Let's run in. And what I did there was die because I didn't have, I didn't expend enough fury, so that's my fault. That shows just how quickly that can happen. Now, you got to leap on top of the target's head to get a full fury return, otherwise you'll run out, and that is a bit of a trap with the build. So again, that reinforces why you got to try and drop the first 2 quakes on an actual target. 1, 2, 3. So notice I've got a fuel globe of fury there. I've got 161 fury because my fury advantage peak here doesn't have another 20 on it, which would be fantastic if it did. 1, 2, 3. I'm out. First one's not going to take much damage, but the last 2 will. So as you can see, Stricken was definitely doing some work there. And I've gone the wrong way. Okay, so that guy's behind a couple of goons, but that's fine, we'll just keep focusing on him. And keep focusing on him. And that'll be him done. Okay, so I'll just finish the Griffin now. You sort of got an idea of the gameplay. So do remember though, with your earthquakes, they do stack. That's why I do sort of recommend trying to get 2 leaps on a target. You're stacking 2 lots of earthquake. You can pop your 4th if you want, but I'd much rather my Fury be spent on slams than a 4th Earthquake, because obviously the slams are worth a lot more damage-wise. Or a bit of sprint. So you can see that I'm getting some pretty decent figures, and you'll note from going through my gear I had almost no augmentation. So for those that are a lower Paragon and are looking at mine and saying, well, that's, you know, obviously you're going to be doing more damage than me, just remember, if you get all your gems up to 80 and you have Ancient everything, you will have 2,400 more strength than I. So you can very quickly catch up with this build. Now I've got a a Seasons version. It doesn't even have crit hit damage on the amulet, and I'm farming T10s for Griffstone keys and bits and pieces without an issue, and speed farming 55s. I'm doing 55s just slightly quicker than this 65 at the moment. This is a slow 65. I've usually killed the Rift Guardian by now, on average. And you note too, as you start to get stronger with the build and it matures, that you'll naturally want to swing away from Ice Blink. So I'm still using Ice Blink in Seasons for 55s, but I'm already starting to get a couple of Ancients. In fact, I've got a better Ancient Helm on that than I do on this one. I've got a set of gloves that drop that's almost as good as this. It's only 0.5% crit hit chance off 10%. Otherwise the rest of the stats are perfect. Okay, so goggles are worth 1% progression, so they're worth hanging on to. 2 leaps on a target, so I know I'm full of fury. Okay. With the cooldown, yep, look, it's going to be a little bit of a wrestle for you at first, particularly if you don't have that attack speed. But you just develop a natural 6th sense for it. So I don't even have to watch that, I just know my cooldowns. It's fully achieved. I'm ready to slam again, or to leap again, and I'm right to go. So if sprint's not your thing, or you want a bit more DPS, by all means, whack Wrath of the Berserker Insanity on it. Use burnable Cathals, and then what you might like to also consider, if you prefer Wrath of the Berserker uptime, cooldown instead of that 15% on shoulders. Seal prefers it. He much rather, when we do our speed 65s, he'd much rather pop Wrath of the Berserker. And the way you use Wrath of the Berserker is when you come to an elite pack, literally pop it and go mad, and then don't use it on anything else. Don't know how for such a big fat guy like that he can sprint. So if you didn't notice earlier, we didn't really get some nice thick packs, or we didn't get a Dream Rift with skeletons or anything like that. But you might have noticed earlier on, the Battle Ray Bloodshed with this does have a great effect in thick mobs. And you want to use it the same way you do with most bar builds, like Hammer of the Ancients and IK6R4, which is a thick mob with an elite in the middle. The Bloodshed will help take down the elite a little bit quicker. What you'll notice in T10 is you can one-shot attacks and it looks like a rolling explosion with Seismic Slam. It's quite fun. So yeah, that's the build. Hope you've enjoyed the tutorial. I will be typing all this up so you don't have to re-watch this clip and put up with my painful voice when you want to reference something quickly in here. I'll have all this broken down. This is just simply designed so you can watch this once and then refer back to the written guide for any other specific bits and pieces that you may need. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed the build.